Josh Palmer prided himself on being the loudest progressive voice in the room, whether it was warranted or not. Mondays were his favorite, a chance to hold court during the team coffee break. He was in the middle of a fiery tirade about the latest legislation when the office door swung open and a man walked in. Not just any man, a new guy. Late 50s, sharp blazer, and most importantly, perched atop his head like a beacon of controversy, a bright red MAGA hat. The room's chatter died instantly, as if someone had hit mute. People stared, eyes darting between the man and Josh, whose face tightened like a coil ready to snap. To Josh, that hat wasn't just fabric, it was a declaration of war. The man, oblivious to the tension or perhaps delighting in it, walked confidently to an empty desk, opened his laptop, and began typing. He didn't acknowledge the stares, the whispers, or the palpable shift in energy. Josh's co-workers exchanged uneasy glances. They knew him too well. One brave soul muttered, "Oh no, here we go," before slipping away, leaving Josh to take the stage solo. Josh approached the man, arms crossed, lips curved in a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "Interesting choice of headwear for a place like this," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The man glanced up briefly, as calm as a lake on a windless day. "Good morning to you too," he said, then returned to his screen, typing away like Josh wasn't even there. That was gasoline on Josh's fire. "That hat represents everything wrong with this country," he snapped. "Do you really think it's appropriate to wear it here?" The man didn't flinch, didn't blink. "It's a free country," he said simply, his tone annoyingly even. Phones started emerging, held discreetly under desks or behind coffee mugs. Co-workers whispered behind hands, their eyes wide as they watched Josh struggle for control. Josh's jaw clenched. Free country wasn't just a response. It was a dismissal. He had expected outrage, an argument, something. Instead, he got calm indifference, and it felt like a slap to the face. "Unbelievable," Josh muttered, throwing his hands up. The man didn't react. To him, Josh was background noise, like the hum of the office printer. Behind Josh, a colleague stifled a laugh, making him spin around. "You think this is funny?" he barked. The co-worker shrugged. "Honestly, a little." The scene ended not with a fiery conclusion, but with Josh stomping back to his desk, fuming as the man quietly continued working, the MAGA hat perched on his head like a crown. The room buzzed with whispers and stifled laughter. Josh had been ready for a fight. Instead, he'd become a spectacle. Josh couldn't let it go. The sight of that red hat burned in his mind like an insult that demanded retribution. Throughout the morning, he lobbed pointed comments into the air, each aimed squarely at the man. "Funny how some people think fashion statements double as personality traits," he quipped loudly near the coffee machine. His colleagues chuckled nervously, exchanging sidelong glances. The man at the center of Josh's ire remained unbothered, eyes glued to his laptop as if he hadn't heard a word. This only fueled Josh's irritation. The calmness felt like a dare, like the man was silently telling him, "Is that all you've got?" By lunchtime, Josh had worked himself into a full-on crusade. He spotted the man near the break room, pouring himself a cup of coffee, and pounced. "Do you enjoy provoking people, or are you just clueless about how offensive that thing is?" Josh asked, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. He gestured aggressively at the MAGA hat, as though it were a weapon of mass destruction. The man sighed and turned, coffee cup in hand. "I'm here to work, not debate politics," he said calmly. "Maybe you should focus on the same." Josh felt a flare of indignation. "Oh, so now I'm the problem." He stepped closer, voice rising. "People like you don't get to come in here and act like you own the place." The man's expression shifted ever so slightly. He took a deliberate step back, holding up a hand. "That's enough," he said firmly, his tone cool but edged with finality. "I'm not here to argue with you." But Josh wasn't done. His co-workers had begun to gather, the unspoken promise of office drama drawing them like moths to a flame. Their presence gave Josh the push he needed to escalate. Without thinking, he jabbed a finger into the man's chest. "Why don't you take your hat and get out of here? You don't belong." The room fell into an eerie silence, the kind that magnifies every breath and heartbeat. The man's jaw tightened, his calm demeanor fracturing just enough to reveal the steel beneath. He stepped back, adjusting his blazer as his gaze locked on Josh. It wasn't anger, it was something colder, sharper. "Noted," the man said evenly before walking away, leaving Josh standing there, chest heaving, surrounded by a half-circle of co-workers who suddenly found their shoes very interesting. As the man disappeared down the hallway, one brave soul whispered, "Wow, Josh, bold move." Josh glanced around, expecting solidarity. Instead, he saw awkward half-smiles and averted eyes. A slow, sinking feeling settled in his stomach. For the first time that day, he wondered if he'd gone too far. The rest of the day passed awkwardly. Josh noticed whispers among his colleagues and a few sympathetic pats on his shoulder. He assumed they were on his side, impressed by his courage. That assumption crumbled when his manager, Claire, asked to see him in her office. Josh strutted in, still basking in his perceived victory. Claire, however, wasn't smiling. "Josh," she began, her tone unusually stern. "Do you know who that man is?" Josh shrugged. "Some MAGA fanatic who stumbled into the wrong building?" Claire's expression hardened. "That MAGA fanatic is Richard Stanton, the new owner of this company." Josh's stomach dropped. "What?" Claire leaned forward. "Richard Stanton bought this firm last week. He's been here all day observing how we work. And now I have to explain why one of my employees verbally assaulted him and made a scene." Josh's confidence evaporated. "Claire, he provoked me. That hat, I don't care about his hat," Claire snapped. "You put your hands on him, Josh. That's inexcusable." Josh tried to argue, but Claire held up a hand. "Richard has asked to meet with you directly. He's waiting in the conference room." Josh entered the conference room, his heart pounding. Richard Stanton sat at the head of the table, the infamous hat resting beside him. His calm demeanor had returned, but his sharp gaze pierced through Josh. "Have a seat," Richard said, gesturing to a chair. Josh sat down, his palms sweating. "Mr. Stanton, Save it," Richard interrupted. "I don't need excuses. I need an explanation. Why do you think it's acceptable to treat anyone, let alone a colleague, the way you treated me today?" Josh stumbled over his words, trying to justify his actions. Richard listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Josh finished, Richard leaned back and spoke. "I wore this hat today because I wanted to see how people would react. It's a test I've done in every company I've acquired. And you? You failed spectacularly. Not because of your political views, but because of your inability to separate them from your professionalism." Josh opened his mouth to protest, but Richard continued. "You judged me based on an accessory. You harassed me, disrupted the workplace, and crossed a physical boundary. That's not just unprofessional, it's unacceptable." "Please, Mr. Stanton," Josh pleaded. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was just—" "You're fired," Richard said bluntly, cutting him off. Josh's world crumbled as the weight of those words sank in. He tried to plead, but Richard stood and opened the door. "You can collect your things and leave immediately, and let this be a lesson. Respect isn't about agreeing with someone. It's about treating them with dignity, regardless of their beliefs." As Josh left the conference room, head hung low, the office buzzed with whispers. Richard walked out shortly after, addressing the staff. "I'm here to build a company where everyone feels respected. Today was a reminder of why that's so important." The staff erupted into applause, while Josh's exit became a cautionary tale. Sometimes the loudest voices learn the hardest lessons.